Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of We've Got Issues. It is our discussion taken fresh from our group chat amongst a group of friends who've known each other for 40 years, which seems like a lifetime. And we like to talk about the things that are on our minds and bring them to you for your consumption and for your consideration, comments, and feedback. So we look forward to hearing from you as to what you think about the topics that we have today. I'll introduce our panelists here again. We got Darin Gray, as always.
What up?
What's up? Representing Detroit Town. And, of course, Ron Evans. How's it going,
Hey, hey.
Right
Coming from the humid DMV.
Hey, the DMV. And, of course, I'm Nick Cates. We all grew up here, or not grew up, but we met here in Los Angeles at USC, and we've been friends ever since. And we always have been debating and going back and forth about topics big and small. But each week, one of us brings the topic that's near and dear to his heart. And this week, Darin Gray is going to take us into his mind. So, Darin, tell us what's on your mind, brother.
Well, what's on my mind is veracity, the truthfulness. And let's roll tape and I'll get into it.
All right.
When you're at your engineering job, a lot of the time things are going to seem very true or false. But there's also a lot of times where two things can be true. And this is a situation where you need to have a bit more of an open mind and acknowledge that sometimes it's not just true or false. Sometimes you have situations where both of the things can exist, and having the awareness of that is going to help you to not just shut down when you see something that you think is binary.
What I'm talking about is two things can be true. So this week, I don't know if you heard that the president was railing on California about the price of eggs. And he said the price of eggs are high in California because of your animal rights laws and protecting chickens. And so my wife says, is that true? And I said, yes, that is true. Our laws do raise prices. It is also true that you need to treat your livestock and your chickens humanely. So two things can be true when we talk about illegal immigration. Two things can be true. Yes, immigrants who are here, a lot of them are just looking for a better way of life, and a lot of them are trying to contribute to society. And with illegal immigration, you drive down wages and increase the cost of the social support system. So two things can be true. And what we have to do is navigate with what our values are, not what the truths are.
Do you take a position on what you have heard, for example, from the Trump administration about eggs and vis-a-vis the policies that California has on livestock? Do you take that as being, what's your viewpoint on hearing something like that from the president?
What he said is true. I mean, it's absolutely true. And I believe animals should be treated humanely. They're both true, and I can hold both positions in my head, and I don't have to do or say anything about it. I can just admit that both things can be true. I do believe that stuffing 4 chickens into a tiny cage is wrong. And I believe that giving chickens free range will raise the egg prices. Both things can be true. And those are the things that we have to contend with.
Did he give both sides of that argument, or did he say, hey, okay, so
he
then
did not. The second side of the argument came when my wife asked me, was it true? Because sometimes my wife will say, is that true? And I will answer her, yes, it is true. And I'll tell her the other side. But I'm not giving an opinion one way or the other. I have opinions on things, but when it comes to a lot of the issues that we face, people will say a truth as a way to persuade other people to their side. But there can be two truths that are not necessarily in opposition. They're just different truths, and not Kellyanne Conway truths, but they're just different truths. It's where you as a human being have to put your value on what you want or what you believe. It has absolutely nothing to do with the truthfulness of someone's statement.
Yeah, but the problem is, and I'll let you jump in, Ron. The problem is that in the world that we live in, oftentimes, if there are two truths, you're only getting one, and so it's incumbent on you to go and seek out the other side, and that's the problem. Most people are not seeking out a deeper meaning of it, and that's a difficulty that we face, particularly with this administration.
Absolutely.
Well, and I also think that one of the challenges, you do have to consider the source. So if you are being intellectually, or in this case, economically inconsistent in your positions, then we should be able to say, you may have a point that by making a more humane egg production, that is going to drive up the costs. But you don't get to stand on the political, moral high ground talking about the price of eggs when you're imposing tariffs that raises the price of goods being imported into this country.
But that's a totally different point for what I was trying to make with my wife, which was you can evaluate the truthfulness of a statement in isolation, and then you can look outside for context and and measure it against your own value system. But someone can say something that is true. The statement itself is true, and it may mean a lot of other things in context. But if you ask me if something is true or not, I'll give you an answer.
Yeah, but you don't always know what's true either. Sometimes someone will say something that you have to investigate, and therein is the problem. The problem is that, maybe it is true, maybe it isn't true. Maybe egg prices in California aren't appreciably more than they are in other states for other reasons. Maybe in Arkansas, chicken prices are the same as California, but they may have another set of problems. I'm not saying that's true, but I'm not saying it's false either. So you have to look that up. But anyway,
and you do have to investigate. But
Yeah.
if if I have a certain amount of land and I have only so many chickens that I can put on that land, and I have another farm where I can put more chickens on that land, I will produce more chickens here, even though it's less humane. So the statement of itself can be true, but there are just other things in context. And I think sometimes what happens with mainstream and social media is people will latch on to a truth and then draw conclusions or make a follow-up statement, that is not contextual.
I think the problem I have is you must put things in context in the process of evaluating whether a statement is true or false, not that whether it's true or false and then figure out the context. So for example, in your example, Farm A has half the chickens as Farm B. So in theory, Farm B should have lower prices than Farm A. That's the point that's being made by you, Darin. The problem is if Farm B is in Alaska and Farm A is in, Texas, there are lower transportation costs. So that has to be factored in. There's the price of the land that has to be factored in, the price of labor. So there's a lot of exogenous factors that you have to look at, and it's not simply number of chickens divided by square feet equals which one should be more price effective.
No, you can make the comparison before the law went into effect and after the law went into effect here in California, because the law is a recent law. That's what I'm saying. You're not comparing chickens in California to chickens in Alaska. You're looking at before the law was passed and after the law was passed. That's what I'm saying is if you look at the way things were before the laws were passed, then the number of eggs produced by a farm was higher. But when the laws were passed, the numbers went down. And it's because you want the chickens to be treated more humanely. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that when you evaluate whether a statement is true or false, you can objectively look at the factors and then look for the context that aligns with your values or with someone else's values or the larger picture. But sometimes you can just look at whether the statement is true or not.
Yeah, I don't think either one of us disagree. At least I don't disagree with the fact that two things can be true at once. I think in some cases more than two things can be true, at once, right? But my problem is that now we have to dig deeper into what do we mean by truth, right? You just mentioned that there were a certain number of eggs produced and then a law passed and then that number changed, right? There could be other reasons in addition to the law why things change. Maybe it was rainfall. Maybe it was feed prices. Maybe it was whatever. That's right. I'll also say that egg prices in California could be higher for eggs that are grown in California, but eggs are grown all over the world, right? So you're in California and you have the opportunity to buy eggs that are produced here under a certain set of rules. And you can also buy eggs from wherever they import them from. So net, your egg prices in California don't have to be higher than anyone else because people have a choice. People in Florida may want California eggs too because they're organic or whatever the whatever it is, your value system. So is it really true that egg prices in California are higher than someplace else? Maybe it's really not, because we have a global egg market, and it may not actually be true in the firm sense of the word.
But you can look at, again, comparing instead of apples to apples, eggs to eggs. If you look at the production, if you just look at simply what was said, was that if you change the conditions to where you have fewer chickens in a geographical space, you will produce fewer eggs. That is true. And fewer eggs will drive up the price. Those are true statements. Now, you can add other factors in, but if you just evaluate that, you can see whether it's true or not. You can do further investigation. You can look at feed price, you look at climate. There's lots of things that go into the overall price of eggs. Just like with the immigration, you can look at the net contribution of immigrant. You can look at all that, but sometimes we get so caught up in evaluating whether what was said aligns with our values is that we will dismiss something as not being true when in fact the words are true. And in the clip he talked about the engineering job, and that happens all the time in engineering, where two things are true. You have to decide what outcome you want, and then you make your decisions based on what outcome you want. And I think we sort of lost that. And the Trump world is sort of exacerbated to something that was already happening in the United States, which was that people were not testing to see what was being said was true, because both Trump administrations, people just say things and it's obvious that it's not the case, but people have not been evaluating the statements made by their government for a long time. And because of that, we're in the situation we're in, where people have been saying stuff all the time that was not true.
Further, Darin, this administration and the acolytes thereof have tried to erode faith in government, possibly for the reasons that government hasn't always addressed the needs of the population as it should. But not only have they said things and done things actually policy-wise that have eroded the efficacy of the government, as well as given many people the impression that government is feckless and is not working in your interest. So every word they say now to those people becomes law, because it's already baked into their walking around sensibility that government is bad by nature, right? So they've completely hijacked what at least a segment of society believes about government.
Well, for some of those people, they're just reinforcing what they already saw in their everyday lives, that the government doesn't listen to me. They say that, the economy is getting better when it wasn't for me. And so,
but it's not getting any better now, Darin. That's
what I'm saying is, but that doesn't matter. Again, if you look at what people are saying, is if you tell me, for instance, and I've had this conversation in our chat, if you say homelessness in Los Angeles is getting better, but in my neighborhood there are more homeless people, and someone else comes along and says they're lying to you, I'm going to believe that, because your perspective is not my perspective. And that's what's happening with the Trump people.
But Darin,
their worldview, he's talking to what they see.
Yet their world is not getting any better. They're getting the red meat of ideology, yes, without the red meat on the table.
Absolutely.
I mean, Darin, if someone says homelessness is down in Los Angeles, and somebody comes to your neighborhood and says, but it's not down in your neighborhood, therefore the government is lying to you, don't you have an obligation to be intellectually curious enough to say, let me look at the stats? And
not when my children are on their way to school and I'm seeing more. You see,
no. Wait. I'm not debating whether homelessness has changed in your neighborhood. I'm saying that the aggregate amount of homelessness has gone down. You can say that it hasn't gone down in your neighborhood, But can you actually refute that it hasn't gone down across Los Angeles without looking at the data?
Well, you can't refute it and you can't confirm it. You can't refute it and you can't confirm it. You
can look at the data. You can look at how the data was collected. Or are you?
Well, let's stick to Los Angeles. The data was collected was that one person getting off the street can be counted multiple times, and so they're tracking whether homeless is decreasing by the number of people that move from the street into a shelter. But that same person can move 3 or 4 times, so your net has not changed. And here in Los Angeles, the mayor is using those types of numbers. And so when people are telling you something and your eyes are contrary to that, it's the same thing the Democrats with the president. When the president says something and people go like, well, my eyes see that as not true.
But Darin, now we have to invalidate your example completely because you're saying that the collection methodology is flawed. I'm assuming in an example that we're talking about that the collection method is accurate.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You've assumed that to be true. But if again, talking about a person, in my experience, if my experience is that the government, every time the government tells me something is getting better, it is not reflected anywhere that I see. I'm going to start to not believe that the government is telling the truth in my experience, because I can only go by my experience. They can put forth all the data they want, but if my home, my community where I work, if everywhere I look, if everywhere I drive, I see more homeless people, your numbers don't mean anything to me. That's what I'm saying. And so when Nick was talking about how this current administration is eroding people's faith in government, I'm saying that was, and I said that before the election, that people's experience is not what the Democrats were saying. And when you look at what people actually experience in their context, the faith has already been eroded. What the Trump administration, they just capitalize on it. They're just throwing, like Nick said, red meat.
Darin, there's an old saying that the plural of anecdote is not data. And you can have anecdotes. You can have neighbors that say that things aren't better for me or for you, but that does not represent data.
Absolutely. I agree.
Facts are facts. And whether homelessness or inflation or whatever it is not affecting you personally does not mean that the statement is not true. It just means it's not applicable. For example, I don't know whether the amount of welfare recipients are going up or down because I'm not on welfare. Do I need to become a welfare recipient so then I can have an informed opinion on whether it affects me or not?
Well, it depends on where you get your data from. One source of data from the right will tell you one thing. Another source of data from the left will tell you something different. Both are true, but they're picking which data to present to you. Mm-hmm. Both can be true. If the Democrats give you this instance and the Republicans give you this instance, like for instance, when the Democrats were saying crime is down across the state of California, and that is true. And then the Republicans say the police are underreporting crime. That is also true. So now I, as a person, I don't know if crime is actually down. The crime stats say they're down, but police are also saying they're underreporting it because the district attorney at the time won't prosecute. And so that's what I'm saying. You can get two sets of true facts from different sources, and then you have to get context. Nick, where are you shaking your head?
I'm shaking my head because you're undermining your own argument, which is basically that there is no real truth. You're not here from anyone. Truth is now all relative. It's like, okay, I get to set. No, wait a minute. You get this set of facts from this entity who has this agenda, and you get this set of facts from another entity who has that agenda.
Yes.
Now they're both ostensibly truth, but they're both ostensibly false. They're both. Neither one of them is the whole truth, and so now it's left up to you as a citizen to have to figure it out. And what most people do is that they figure it out based on what's valid for them. And everybody is running in different directions with different opinions, essentially. Now, no one knowing all the facts, but your preset now determines what the truth is. And it's not a matter of discernment, Darin. You're presenting this as if two things can be true at the same time. And what I'm telling you is that your argument now is that you're not getting any truth. Yeah. It's up to you to determine what the truth is because you're not getting the real facts from anyone.
Nick
You're
is
not
right.
getting all of the facts.
No, Nick is right. What you're now saying is you can't believe anything.
Yeah, you
Well,
can't.
you have to, like I said, I said that you have to evaluate it in context. But the statement that the reported murders are down, if that is a fact, and I mean, not murders, reported crime is down, and over here, we're underreporting crime. Both of those things can be true at the same time because that is what happened.
Fine. Stipulate it. So now what conclusion do you draw based on these two sources of information?
Well, the conclusion you draw, you have to decide.
No, Darin, what do you decide?
What I decide is, do I need to buy another firearm? Do I need to increase my insurance? Do I have enough cameras on my house?
So in other words,
because anarchy is on the doorstep.
Well,
there is no truth. It's every man for himself.
Yes, but it's always been that way. We just have access to more information now. The way in which you can look at data coming in is, it's garbage in, garbage out. So you decide what, as a human being, you decide. You have all these senses. In the robot world, we call it sensor fusion. You have all this information coming in, and you have to decide, what do I give priority to? What will impact me? What has the greatest potential to impact me positive? What has the greatest potential to impact me negative? And you're always going to have your bias bent based on your ideology. If you're more inclined to believe that the minorities are at the door and they're about to kill you, you're going to have a certain bent. If you're more inclined to believe that everybody is good, you're going to have a different bent. So it's your bias taking in information. But what happens is people start dismissing the truthful part of what the opposing people are saying and not giving ears or at least validity to something that someone says because they don't like what it sounds like.
So Darin, I'm going to give you a chance to catch your breath, have a sip of water, because I think Nick and I are hearing the same thing, but I'm not going to speak for Nick. What I think I just heard is, when presented with information, we're not even going to call it truth. We're not going to call it, data.
Just data.
When presented with two pieces of information, I'm going to take the worst interpretation of it, because that's my worldview, is to believe the worst of mankind.
And I'll go you one better. Not even one better. I'll just go in another direction from what I've heard, which is that this is a very dystopian kind of point of view, where as I said, there is no objective truth. Every bit of data that comes in from your standpoint should be just reviewed or taken in with the skepticism off the top, because whoever is presenting the point of view, and actually I don't disagree with it, because everyone's trying to sell you something, whether it's a policy or it's about what the economy is doing, whatever it is, everyone's giving you the narrative that they believe, whether they truly believe it as being in your best interest or because they want you to favor them for whatever reason. So I do get that. The problem is that democracy cannot run that way. And that's why we are slipping into an autocratic kind of bent, because people just don't have the bandwidth to survive in the real world and try and decipher every bit of data that comes their way and figure out like what's true and not true. Because oftentimes it's neither, it's both, or it's some shade of the two.
Well, I think what happens, and Darin's a good example, even though he probably doesn't want to admit this, is people go to their corners and get reinforced with information that, promotes their worldview. As you said, Nick, I think Darin has a very dystopian view of the next, the rest of our lives. And he's going to process things around, I don't believe that, I need to buy another gun.
Right.
Well, I'll put it into a context that we all know and love. USC football. All right. So you look at USC football and you can look at a game that we won. And our friends do this all the time, but they will look at it and say, one person will look at those same stats and say, we have an effective running game because it sets up the pass and we can pass 40 times. And someone else will say, our running game is terrible because we can't close out a game by running the ball. Both of those things can be true, right? You can have both of those things be true. You, based on your bet, I'm a run the ball guy. Some younger folks are like, I want to see highlights. I'm a pass. So you can have the exact statistics, and you've seen it on our text chain where people will post a picture of the USC statistics and make a statement, and someone else from those same statistics will make a different statement. Both things can be true. You have to evaluate it from your particular lens or bias and decide if you're going to buy season tickets or not.
You know what the deciding factor though is, which you bring up something that I think the scoreboard will tell you what the truth is. The truth is that if you pass 40 times and you run 15 and you lose the game because you couldn't hold the ball at the end of the game or whatever the case may be, it supports the critics who would say that's not a good strategy. But if you win that strategy, but if you use that strategy and you consistently win, like I don't care what anybody says. Like it's like as a coach, you say, I don't care what any of the critics say. What does the scoreboard say week after week? We're winning, and we're winning convincingly. So if you don't like the fact that I don't run the ball, come at me. I got stats on my side which say that we're 10-0, right? So that's the difference.
Yeah, and I think it's Monday morning quarterbacking because again, you're looking at the data to support your position. If you don't like the fact that we don't run the ball, you're going to say, well, we can't close out games, but you're going to ignore the fact that I think it was 2019, Joe Burrow and I forgot the two wide receivers that are both in the NFL right now. One of them still playing with him for the Bengals. All they did was pass, and they won the national championship. So your mindset going into the debate is going to shape what data you agree with.
That's what I was saying, sort of.
Well, I mean, I think
both can, like I'm saying, going into football, both can be true. I can make a statement on the statistics and say that is true, and I can make a different statement on those same statistics and say that is true. But depending upon what I'm trying to get across, my lens for what I believe and my lens for what I communicate will be different and shaded by my viewpoint. But both things still can be true.
Yeah, but I think when you look at football, feels like an August preview version. Running, passing, penalties, all of those are what's called leading indicators. The lagging indicator is the scoreboard. And if a team goes like when USC won the national championship in 2003, 2004, I don't remember what the passing percentages were. I just know that in 2004, we were like 14-0 or something like that. Okay. LSU was like 16-0 or whatever. Okay. The scoreboard tells you, what did Bill Parcells say? You are what your record says you are. Mm-hmm. And we may not like how he makes the meal, but if his meal is 14-0, keep cooking.
Right. And to that point, sports is a much more solid set of data that you can go upon because the results are the results. Government is a different thing. Government is an ongoing problems continuing to rise and fall, like economy continuing to do different things. So you have the runway to present facts and represent them and change your mind and whatever the case may be. But once the clock strikes zeros, the results are the results in sports. And that's the difference between government. And people just don't have the headspace, I think.
And I agree that at the end, every game has a clock. The clock runs out. But, if you recall, Ron, early on when Lincoln Riley came and I said, I don't think he's any better than Clay Helton. And you pilloried me. But then when the records were the same, I said, I don't think he's any better. And to this day, you don't see a difference. But I can say, if you look at the same point in their careers, they had the same win-loss record. This person is not any better than this person. I can say that And that is true.
I know.
Wait, let me finish. When it comes to their records, I can say that because it is true. If they have the same record after a certain number of games. Now, you can say, but this one has 2 Heisman winners behind him. That is also true. And I'll say, or 3, and I'll say, neither one of them have won a national championship. And that is true. What I'm saying is 2 things can be true, but depending upon your perception or your bias or your bent, it means something different and you relay something different. But all 3 of those things are true. They, at one point, they had the same record. At one of them had more Heisman, neither won national championships. And I can then say, because of these 3 things, X, Y, and Z, but that is not true. That is my opinion. And you say, because of those 3 things, X, Y, and Z. But the 3 things are definitely facts.
I'm not going to even.
Because you can't.
No, I can. Trust me, I can. Believe me, I can.
For the August one.
But,
I tell you what, I mean, since Ron is being gentlemanly about his comeback on that, I will say that again, the result of those facts that you just mentioned means that there is a clock on him as well. So let's say that this season looks like last season, or maybe just a small increase from what we saw last season. There will be repercussions and consequences to that, right? So it's not like there is no repercussions to it. So now someone's going to end up being ultimately right, where he either gets an extension or he's safe on safe ground, or he's really on the hot seat, potentially out, right? Because no one has the kind of money and time to invest in that kind of comparison when Clay Helton was so woefully, unsatisfying as a coach.
Well, and the last thing I'll say on that is, even with that, you look at our other 2 former coaches, Kiffin and Sarkisian, they left, but the story kept going and they got better. What I'm saying is, even in sports,
I'm sorry. They left, and who kept getting better?
They got better.
Okay, all right.
They both got better. So even then, there won't be any ultimate truth, because if you look at some of our friends in terms of Kiffin or Sarkisian, their ultimate truth are like, see, they're terrible, but they've both gone on and had success afterward. So there won't be an ultimate decider. There won't be, like, haha, you won the argument. So that won't be the case. But
okay.
I know we're running a little long. I just wanted
No. You don't get to close the chapter when you've got to your end of the sentence. All right, I'm just going to say this. We all know that USC has been under financial pressure, as we've mentioned recently. They increased their debt structure by $1.2 billion since 2021 or 2020. And there's a news article that said that they were cutting people in the athletic department.
Yep.
I would make the comparison to Clay Helton, and I will go even farther back. I will say everything since Pete Carroll, with the culmination being Clay Helton, being analogous to the mismanagement of a house burning to the ground. And then we hire a firefighter named Lincoln Riley. We don't provide the fire trucks, fire hoses, training, infrastructure. And then a year later, we're like, yo, that house is still burned down. You ain't any better than the last guy that was trying to put out the fire. That's where we were with all the things that have been going on, including the hiring away of the general manager from Notre Dame that's made a big impact already. I'm actually more optimistic now than I've been since Caleb Williams. With that said, last thing I'll say, I learned certainly in business school, and I've used it reasonably effectively throughout my career. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. So I agree with you, Darin, that you can manipulate data. I love me some y-axis to be able to tell a story that I want to tell, making sure it's defensible and truthful. But we all manipulate data to our advantage, and you have to say, okay, I see what you're saying, but I got to look at the formula and understand exactly how are you calculating that. And I think that's what our responsibility as citizens is.
Yeah. I'll say my last piece, and then I'll turn it over to you, Darin, to give your last thoughts on the matter, and then take us to your parting shot. And that is that I am both disturbed and actually not totally in disagreement with you about the recipe that you have established, because I see it every day in my assessment of what's going on. I said many episodes ago that we are in the age of discernment. Like, if you don't have the ability to take in information and filter it, not for just what you want it to be, but really try and suss out the truth, you are doomed to be a victim in someone else's situation. And I do believe that that's why so many people just want someone who has the strength and charisma to basically make all the pain go away. And unfortunately, that fear that is behind that is that causes us to make bad decisions. And I hope that people who are watching this and who are just going about their day-to-day lives really take heed to the fact that truth is more relative now than anything, because you can be fed partial truths, data, whatever, and some of it could sound true or even be true, but not be the whole story. And by following that, you end up in a place that you don't want to be in, having to buy guns like Darin. So Darin, you finish this up.
Well, my final shot is, remember the Maine. If you recall back in history, I think it was the beginning of the Spanish-American War, in which we essentially stole the Caribbean. The ship was blown up by a mine, and the Spanish did mine the harbor. And so you could say those two things that are true, and it does not necessarily mean that the Spanish mine blew up the Maine. So what I'm saying is, this has always been the case throughout the history of empires, which is there can be multiple, as Ron said, multiple truths, and you have to be able to evaluate and to discern them. So
yes. Well, good. Well, if you guys have an opinion about what we've been talking about today, I think this is a subject that's ripe for all of us to kind of consider, like, what is truth and whether more than one thing can be true at a time, and how you deal with that. So we'd love to get your feedback about that and see where you land on the subject. So before we get out of here, Darin, I'm sure you have a brighter note to take us out on for your parting shot.
Yeah, if you could roll the clip for the palm trees, and I'll just give a quick synopsis of it.
All right. Let's do that.
The palm trees of Southern California conjure up images of sunny days and rides in convertibles with the top down. And though there are many different palm trees dotted around the Southern California landscape, only the California fan palm, Washingtonia filifera, is native to California. All of Southern California's other palm trees have been imported, from the slender Mexican fan palms that line so many LA boulevards to the feather-topped Canary Island date palm. The Washingtonia filifera is primarily found in the desert regions of California, including the Coachella Valley.
So after the fires, the recent fires in January, where the palm trees were just getting lit up, I just started becoming fascinated with palm trees, because palm, are not native here, and you have a semi-arid desert, and you have combustible trees, palm trees, and eucalyptus trees. So I just got fascinated by palm trees and sort of got into a rabbit hole about where do these things come from? Like, how do they spread so much? How are they all planted in such perfect rows? So it was just a thing that I was just curious about.
So in your moment of nerding out, like, what I seem to recall that in the development of Los Angeles, they were imported. I want to say they were imported from Italy or something like
Spain.
Spain.
Okay. Yeah, Spain. Well, it was Spain to Mexico, and then Mexico to California.
Okay. And so you just now have a newfound appreciation for palm.
Just whenever I pass one, I just stop and take a look at them. They're different. They've got, because LA, they're just noise for the most part. But lately, I've just been taking notice as to the different ones. I just found it fascinating because stuff like that will catch my attention. I'll stare at a palm tree for 15 minutes and get lost in thought. So just another nerdy thing.
Just another moment of nerd. I get you.
You are a complicated man. You have now shown us parting shots about palm trees and birds, and you are a riddle inside of an enigma, inside of a
black
paradox.
box in a dark
Oh my
room.
God.
Yeah, that, I didn't see that one coming. Palm
No.
tree, and I think the words that came out of his mouth were like, I can stare at a palm tree and just get lost in thought. I don't know that I'll ever hear those words again in my life. Palm trees just aren't that interesting to me, but maybe I'm missing something.
I mean, when I come back to LA, I don't take for granted the palm trees. I see them and I think they're beautiful and they're certainly iconic, but that's about it. Darin's got like, are you turning into a tree hugger? Is that what you're doing?
Gun-toting tree hugger.
Just nature just fascinates me. It truly does.
Yes, you're a paradox, my man.
Unless the nature gets into Darwinism, which would be on brand for Darin.
Right.
So,
well, that has been your moment of geek, palm trees. So if you guys have a special affinity or opinion about the native or imported flora and fauna of Los Angeles, we'd certainly love to hear about that too. So Darin, thank you for those two great topics today. That palate cleanser to lead us out. It was quite an unexpected and very nerdy treat. So appreciate everybody being here. Ron, Darin, as always, you guys are fascinating to talk with, and we hope that you guys feel the same. And look, like and share our content with those who you may know who are also interested in talking about these sometimes interesting and offbeat subjects. So we appreciate you guys being with us. We hope you'll be with us the next time. Darin, Ron, I'll see you guys soon. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of We've Got Issues. See you later.
see ya.
See ya.